Next on AM 1480 WLEA, the Newsmaker Show. Here's Brian O'Neill.
And welcoming this morning Jon Ostrower, who's the editor-in-chief of Air Current. Used to be a reporter for both CNN and the Wall Street Journal. And Air Current is an online airline publication. Do you also sell magazines, John?
No, we're 100% digital.
Yeah, that's the way it's going these days. Jon Ostrower, how has COVID-19 affected the airline industry as far as passengers go?
Well, when you think about it, I mean, so much of COVID-19 is us staying at home, and when you stay at home, people aren't traveling, and so when COVID really hit the U.S. in March, everyone they stopped traveling. I mean, people stopped moving. They stopped buying tickets. They stopped planning vacations. They stopped traveling for business. We all started using Zoom. So there's been a huge hit to the aviation business, the airline business, as people just have not been staying home. But as we've gotten into summer, here we are, heading in through July now. People have started coming back to flying. It's mostly leisure travelers. So people who would be taking vacations and taking advantage of the fact that fares are really cheap because of essentially the financial troubles within the airline industry. So you look at all of that and say, okay, well now the question of how do passengers feel comfortable about traveling again? And there are different policies on different airlines, but generally people are wearing masks as best as possible. Most airlines are actually requiring masks. So people are still reticent about getting on airplanes because they're concerned about COVID. But the truth is, when you look at an airplane cabin, it's actually the air on an airplane cabin is actually really clean. I think the biggest concern is that if you don't have symptoms and you're moving from place to place, you are asymptomatic, and it's more about spreading it where you're going rather than just sitting on an airplane if you're wearing a mask, which has from the evidence the information that I've seen from public health officials says that significantly lowers the transmission of COVID. So yeah, it's a constantly evolving process as we learn more about how this virus works, but also as people airlines try to get the economy and their businesses up and running again. And it's this push and pull, especially as there's a big spike in cases in Texas, Florida, Arizona, and so on and so forth. So it's going to be these forces that they're going to be pulling on each other as we go through the rest of the year.
Now, as far as dealing with COVID-19, do the airlines all have different rules, or does the FAA have that? Has the FAA come up with a set of standard rules and regulations for all the airlines to obey?
Yeah, well, that's a great question. There really has not been a set group of standards and requirements and rules for airlines to follow around this. There are recommendations that come from the CDC and from public health officials, but generally speaking, the airlines are making decisions themselves around what policies they want their passengers to abide by, and it's some airlines are saying, okay, yes, you absolutely have to wear a mask. Some are saying, if you don't wear a mask, you will not be allowed to fly, and if you refuse to wear a mask, you won't be allowed to fly again on the airline. Some are blocking middle seats, some are not. Generally, the uniting factor across all of the airlines is that they are aggressively cleaning the airplanes between flights to make people feel comfortable, to make their crews feel comfortable, to make their flight attendants and pilots feel comfortable about getting on an airplane every day for their jobs, and also passengers for getting where they're going. But generally speaking, no, there really is not a single standard, and frankly, that's caused quite a bit of heartburn amongst the traveling public, where you to some extent you see airlines actually, whether they will admit it or not, are jockeying for position to make people feel as safe and comfortable as possible on an airplane based on the policies they have around COVID-19, the spread of this virus.
I did a Google search recently on the reviews of the different airlines to see what the passengers were saying. And I see that, some of the airlines have complaints about the flight attendants being cranky. Wondering, Jon Ostrower, has tension on airlines increased with COVID-19? What are we looking at? A half-filled plane or a plane that's barely filled, and things get unruly, and how's that been going?
I actually think there's been a lot less of that. It feels to me. I think people are really trying to keep to themselves and not go down that road. I mean, yes, we've seen a few incidents, little ones here and there where passengers don't want to put on a mask and they make a show of it for social media or whatever. But I would say generally people are just everyone. As the old saying goes, ain't nobody got time for that. It's been a really challenging year for everybody. And look, and the flight attendants and the pilots are under tremendous professional stress. I mean, the industry has gone through, is going through what is undoubtedly a worse financial crisis than 9/11, than the financial crisis, all put together.
That was one of the questions I was going to ask you. How does this compare with the aftermath of 9/11 back in October 2001?
Oh, well, so the worst days of the slowdown of the shutdown of air travel overall in the period after 9/11. So there were 4 days of shutdown immediately after the attacks, and then the amount of flying that actually took place once things got rolling again dropped about 30%. And that was an enormous contraction at that point. Just for comparison, in the U.S., we got down about 95%. So you think about the financial toll of that. And, the TSA reported this morning that 700,000 people were flying again over the 4th of July weekend. And that's actually, that was up from as low as 87,000. You take that and you put that against what is normally about 2.3, 2.4 million. We're still really underwater here in a really big way, and there's a long way to go. So coming back to what I was saying a moment ago was that pilots and flight attendants are under tremendous stress. Everyone in the airline industry is under tremendous stress because literally they're not sure if their jobs are going to be there after October 1st when the government assistance under the CARES Act actually begins to reset itself. So, that causes it, like anyone feeling like their job is at risk. That causes an enormous amount of tension. But I think, pilots and flight attendants have done their jobs under incredible, grace, and grace under pressure, given everything going on right now.
Talking with Jon Ostrower. He's the editor-in-chief of Air Current. That's an online airline publication. Jon used to work for both CNN and the Wall Street Journal. Jon Ostrower, with the rules about COVID-19 being different from this state to that state, how does that affect flight in America when you're going from, North Carolina to New York State? Or maybe you're going from, New York State down to Mexico or Canada. How's that work?
Well, it's a great question, and I think that's just sort of one of the bigger points here is we really haven't had a national strategy for handling this. It's been 50 different strategies, and then the federal government has their own, which has at times been in extreme conflict with the states. So, for example, this is a great question. So, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York implemented last week a requirement for a 14-day quarantine for anyone flying in from one of 16 states that have had soaring COVID cases. So if you fly from, say, Texas to Rochester or to New York City, you are required to go into quarantine for 2 weeks, regardless of whether or not you have symptoms or whatever. and just to make sure that you're not transmitting and spreading COVID. So within that's the requirement of 3 different states. That affects the entire rest of the country and how people are moving. But again, there isn't a single unified standard for how people are supposed to be handling this, and it really is. It's probably making it far more complicated not having a national strategy around transportation. That we're sort of seeing essentially, again, like I said, 50 different policies pop up at every given time, and the airlines don't have a good sense of how they can plan their operations around that. Travelers don't know if they should be where they should be going and when they should be going based on the guidelines that's in front of them. So it creates far more confusion as this economic engine tries to rev itself up again while effectively being stuck in the mud because of COVID.
I don't know what the rules on this, and as you say, there's no set of standards nationwide from the FAA. Have there been many cases at all of people with the COVID getting on planes, buying tickets and flying, and I don't know, maybe contaminating other people? Have there been any cases like that?
Well, there is, certainly we know from public health officials. I'm not a public health expert, so I do not claim to be one. But my understanding of what epidemiologists have said really says that people can transmit COVID even if you don't have symptoms, and that's been a big concern around the interaction of folks who are asymptomatic for transmitting COVID to those who obviously don't have it and then spread and so on and so forth. I guess your question is, can you get COVID on an airplane? And the answer is there has been research to show that yes, you can if you're sitting with someone who does not have a mask on, and the fact that if someone sneezes or coughs, droplets move through the air. Yes, just as in any closed indoor setting. The interesting thing about aviation is that the way that the systems of the aircraft, the way air moves, air actually moves from the top of the ceiling down to the floor. So they're actually trying they're coming up with inventions to redirect the air to actually push it down to the floor in front of you, almost like an air shield. There's a device that's being developed by Boeing and others to actually change the flow of the air. But within the actual aircraft itself, there are systems that have essentially hospital-grade, surgical-grade HEPA filters that filter out a huge number of viruses, dust, bacteria, so on and so forth, to protect the rest of the airplane. So it's actually it becomes a safer environment relative to others when you're out and about flying.
Speaking with Jon Ostrower, and he's from the aircurrent.com, an online airline publication. He's the editor-in-chief. We're going to take a quick break, then check the forecast. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
The Ryan Agencies, your local, independent insurance agencies. The Ryan Agency supports your hometown. Unlike online insurance companies, the good people at the Ryan Agency live and invest here, annually supporting many local organizations. Contact the Ryan Agencies today, your hometown supporter and source for all things insurance.
Insurance protection you can rely on. The Ryan Agency.
Checking in now with meteorologist Rob Carroll, who says it's going to be another hot one.
It certainly is, and the National Weather Service agrees with me, Brian. They have put a heat advisory up for the area. That's in effect until 8 p.m. this evening. Our temperatures today between 90 and 95, but it's going to feel like, because of the humidity, it's close to 100 this afternoon. If you don't handle the heat well, good idea to stay inside today with the air conditioning. We've got lots of sunshine in the forecast. Temperatures will be up to about 90 to 95 later today. Sunrise was at 5:43 this morning. The sun sets tonight at 8:48. Now, we'll look for an isolated shower or thunderstorm during the evening to help cool things off. Otherwise, we're just partly cloudy overnight, 70 to 75. Tomorrow, looks like we're going to be partly sunny. Could see a shower or thunderstorm tomorrow afternoon. Warm and humid, 85 to 90. Tomorrow night, scattered showers and thunderstorms are possible as low pressure moves into the southern part of the state. We're 65 to 70. And it looks like showers and thunderstorms on Saturday. Highs will be 80 to 85. It's also going to be very humid as we go through the day on Saturday, Brian.
Speaking with Jon Ostrower from aircurrent.com. He's the editor-in-chief. He went from working at both CNN and the Wall Street Journal to this field. How did you? I'm wondering, Jon Ostrower, are you a pilot? How did you get into this job here at aircurrent.com?
Yeah, so about 12 years ago, I was actually an independent blogger. Believe it or not, I was on my own. And I've always loved aviation, things that fly, and I love this business. And I just started looking at one particular element of it when I was working in a very different field. And this was something I did in my spare time. I was looking at the development of Boeing as they were building the Dreamliner, 787 Dreamliner for the first time. This was 2007, 2008. And I stumbled into a couple big stories around it, and ended up joining a trade publication at the end of 2007, spent 4.5 wonderful years there. Joined the Wall Street Journal to cover Boeing and global aerospace in 2012. Spent 4.5 wonderful years there too, and then joined CNN to be aviation editor for the network. And in 2018, I launched the Air Current, which was something I had always wanted to do, start my own publication, and really kind of take a deeper look at various parts of the aviation business. And it's been a tremendous journey to be able to invest all this time and energy into a subject that I've always loved. So I feel tremendously lucky to be able to do this work, and especially when a time when aviation is on all our minds, given COVID, to be able to answer these questions is like I always like to say, there's always an aviation angle to anything, and so this has been a fantastic opportunity to try and illuminate sort of the answers rather than try to speculate and amidst a lot of angst and chaos that we've seen across the country with COVID and aviation.
I always like to ask this of other reporters, not that I'm at the colleague level of Jon. Having worked at CNN, he's much higher up than I am. But, I want to ask you, Jon, interesting people you've covered or met over the years, or maybe the most interesting passenger you've sat next to on a plane?
Oh, God, that's a great question. It's interesting. The most interesting passenger I've sat next to on an airplane.
Well, I'm thinking, like when I was working in radio down in Macon, Georgia, and I've said this probably so many times, the listeners are rolling their eyes, but, O.J. Simpson came into my studio to get away from the reporters in the hallway who were really crowding him. So he came and hid in my studio for a few moments. Anyone big like that, or any just interesting conversations you've had?
So about 2 years ago, I was on a flight from, I think it was Fort Lauderdale to Seattle, and which is a long corner to corner flight in the U.S. And a friend of mine pointed out that Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco, was actually on the flight with me, because he was apparently tweeting that he was doing the same route at the same time, and he and I, the former football player, we actually struck up a conversation over Twitter on the same airplane as we flew across the country, along the way with everyone participating in the world as we had the conversation. It was very, very, probably one of the more surreal moments I've had on an airplane. But really nice guy. He
sure.
Actually, met him at the end of the flight when we got to Seattle. But it was that probably is probably up there as far as one of the more memorable aircraft journey mates.
Talking with Jon Ostrower. He's the editor-in-chief of the aircurrent.com, an online airline publication. And you wrote an article about it's not going to be gimmicks, attention-getting gimmicks that are going to get people flying again, but just people developing confidence and earning back money here during this COVID period to get people flying again.
Yeah, it's so here's the thing. I mean, I think the biggest thing is that people are going to give people confidence is that they feel like there is a vaccine that allows them to not get this virus or prevent as many possible strains of this virus as is plausible. And so within that, that's what's going to give people confidence. And then once they have that confidence, they're going to ask themselves, do I have the financial wherewithal to actually fly? Can I take a vacation? Can I afford to take a vacation? Does my employer have the money to send me to go do my business elsewhere? So what it all is going to come down to is those two factors. Do people feel confident getting on an airplane that they're not going to get sick and when they're traveling? And do people have the resources to do it? And if those two answers are both yes, then a recovery can really begin in earnest. But until those are satisfied, there's going to be a lot of bouncing along these low levels that we're at right now as people try and get back to some semblance of normal given everything going on.
This is an interesting article from March 12th of this year. 3 points. European travel bans fine print, Boeing shock, coronavirus, and Italian aerospace. And this is from the aircurrent.com, the March 12th edition. Tell us about that article, Jon Ostrower.
So 3 points is a newsletter that we do as part of our product, and it really kind of takes a smaller bite-sized version of the news, and kind of identifies 3 pertinent points that wouldn't necessarily become a whole large-scale article, but that really allows you to kind of build out an idea or a point that is important, but again, not a huge article in its own right. So 3 points is really an opportunity for us to look at the week's news, the week looking forward, or the week looking back, and put those events into context. So in that particular case, March 12th. That was right in the early days of COVID in the United States. So we were really trying to understand where things were headed, and what the initial fallout was. So I think what you talked about was Italian aerospace. That one was particularly about the way that what was going on in Italy with all the COVID cases there, and how that was having a ripple effect across the global aviation industry. In terms of for Boeing, it was this incredible hit to their production as airlines just weren't able to take delivery, didn't have people to come pick up the airplanes or the financial wherewithal to do it. And so, when you look at all these different elements and you say, okay, well, how do we begin to wrap our heads around everything going on? And at that point, it was really virtually impossible. I mean, we were in this free fall. So, I would say that really becomes a way of kind of getting at the story as it evolves in kind of a bite-sized way, rather than these bigger articles that we're also really known for.
Right. Jon Ostrower from the aircurrent.com. So tell us about the readers, your online readers. I'm guessing that pilots and stewardesses and flight attendants read it. Did you get any small plane type pilots? The little Cessna guys and girls that check this website out too.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a really huge cross section of readers. We're really fortunate to have perspectives from all across, primarily across aviation. I mean, it is a publication primarily geared for those who love aviation and those who work in aviation. And so you have everyone from CEOs and business leaders and C-suite decision makers, all the way down to those that build airplanes, factory workers, pilots, flight attendants, those who actually interact with the airplane, engineers everywhere in between. And also, we have a large following in the financial community that in terms of how they make decisions around where they try to forecast the industry as far as the financial performance of these companies, and also stocks and so on and so forth. So we do have a really rich, deep following that, like you said, goes from little Cessnas all the way to 747s and A380s. So and everywhere in between. So we're really fortunate to have a really great cross section of readers who are passionate about this industry and who derive their livelihood from it.
Well, thank you very much to Jon Ostrower from the aircurrent.com. And thank you for coming on. Also, thank you to Gary Ostrower. I'm sure that our listeners who hear Gary every Tuesday were kind of wondering, I wonder if there's a connection there. Well, thank you to Gary Ostrower for lining up this interview, and very interesting interview with Jon Ostrower today. John, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Brian. I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.